The Locked On Podcast Network presents the NBA Big 3 in 30. The 3 biggest stories in the NBA from our local experts at the Locked On Podcast Network. We bring you the real story, why it matters, what's next, who wins the big game, and more, all in 30 minutes. The NBA Big 3 in 30 starts now with the biggest stories in the NBA.
Paolo Banchero has signed a max extension.
You are Locked On Magic, your daily Orlando Magic podcast.
This was the last piece of business we had this offseason. The Magic essentially introduced Tyus Jones to the media. He spoke to the media on Monday. We'll talk a little bit about what he said later on in the show. Talk a little bit more about what he said later on in the week. We got to stretch our content out this week, folks. We'll get to all that, plus some Summer League stuff later in the week. But the last big piece of business that we had was this extension for Paolo Banchero. It is not a surprise that Paolo Banchero got the max. Not unlike Franz Wagner last year getting the max, which he got a max contract too. It was not surprising that Paolo Banchero was going to get it. Really, the only piece of negotiation was whether Paolo was going to get a player option on that fifth year, which he ultimately did get. Paolo had all the leverage. He is the star. He gets to do what he wants. So it's not breaking news. Like if you've listened to the show, you heard me say, oh, coming up next on Locked On Magic, we're going to do this unless Paolo signs this max extension. This was not a surprise to anybody. What is or might be a surprise to some, though, is that Paolo, not only does Paolo deserve this, like this is just the market, he deserves this max contract. What might be surprising to some is what this all means. What this essentially says about the Magic. It's been a little bit of a debate. Maybe not among Magic fans. I think Magic fans all watch Paolo every day. They see him game to game. They know the team that he's had to play with. And they see a player who has lifted this team from being destitute, frankly, into being one of the best young teams in the league. The stats people don't like Paolo. Like Paolo's statistical profile, the raw numbers are great. The advanced numbers don't like him, and none of us can figure out why our eyes don't match what the numbers see. But because the Magic spend so much of their time in anonymity, because nobody has really seen Paolo play outside of the playoffs, and frankly, his playoff performances should be enough to put some of this debate to rest, it is a constant debate to prove Paolo's stardom. Maybe it's just a loud group of people on the internet. Maybe it's just Oklahoma City Thunder fans, which again, I will agree with Jalen Williams on this. Why are we tearing people down to build others up? Jalen Williams is awesome. Paolo Banchero is awesome. They're both doing exactly what their teams have asked and needed them to do. They'll both get paid. Jalen Williams may not get a max. Paolo will, because Paolo is a max player to the Orlando Magic. He is their superstar. And that's what this means. That's what this contract says. Now, like last summer when the Magic gave Franz Wagner his max extension, it was a statement of belief in him as an all-star, in him as a core player. And indeed, the Magic have successfully paid all 3 of their drafted core players. They all took 5-year deals. The summer of 2030, all 3 of these guys can be free agents. The Magic have 4 years to figure out how to win a championship. And we're going to talk about that. Don't worry. We're not going to be quiet about it anymore. The Magic truly feel like they needed to invest in their own. And they believe in their own. But it starts with your centerpiece player. Everything in this league starts with your centerpiece player. And no matter how much anybody wants to doubt Paolo Banchero, the Magic are here to say, We believe in him, and we're going to let things play out. Is Paolo Banchero the kind of star you can build a championship around? It sure looks that way. It sure feels that way. But here's the thing. You can't draw conclusions until you see something play out. You can't draw conclusions before the experiment has been run. And yes, the Magic are investing a lot of money in the experiment, but A, what choice do they have? And B, why wouldn't they believe? Why wouldn't they believe that Paolo Banchero is the kind of star they can build around? A rookie of the year, an all-star, certainly to be a perennial all-star. A player who has stepped his game up in both of his postseason appearances. Last year, Paolo Banchero averaged 25.9 points per game, I believe. Even in an injury-filled season. Even in a season where he wasn't as available as you hoped for. He still averaged around 5 assists per game, a little bit less than 5 assists per game. He still averaged 8 rebounds per game. And in the playoffs, he stepped his game up. 29.4 points per game, 8.4 rebounds, and 4.2 assists per game, while shooting 44.4% from 3 in the 5-game series against Boston Celtics. If there's one thing that Paolo Banchero has proven as he continues to put up historical numbers, stuff we haven't seen since LeBron's early career, since Luka's early career, Paolo Banchero continues to do things that put him in those groups. And frankly, while the Magic don't care because they believe, and Magic fans don't care because they believe, it's frankly ridiculous that the rest of the league has this narrative that he doesn't work, that he isn't good enough. I don't know how you can watch the Magic in those 2 playoff series against both Cleveland and against Boston and not come around to the conclusion that this guy is a winning player, that this guy is going to elevate his game in the biggest moments. And this guy is someone that's going to push his team to be better. If anything, what the last 2 seasons have shown is that Paolo is ready. He needs the supporting cast, especially offensively, because the Magic have covered for his defensive weaknesses. And look, Paolo tries hard on defense. I'm not going to sit here and take that slander either. The Magic needed to treat him like the star that he is. This is part of it. A max contract is part of that conversation. Paolo Banchero is the Magic's superstar. He is the next big star in the NBA, whether anyone wants to admit that or not. The NBA probably isn't ready to admit that. They certainly have buried him on TV despite being the number 1 pick, despite doing all these historical things, despite being on a team that has been extremely competitive for the last 2 seasons. This was always the path Paolo was taking. He's known he was going to be this kind of player probably since he was 16 or 17, if not sooner. And the Magic are the lucky ones that get to go on this journey with him. They're the lucky ones that have pushed their way into the conversation, that have made this thing work. And now the Magic have their centerpiece player. Now the Magic have their guy to build around.
Check your bank account and wonder where'd all my money go between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment. It's easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes in, your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app, it's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place, so you stop just managing your money and start building wealth. Instead of juggling multiple apps, you can use Monarch to check your finances, track spending, and even plan long-term goals. Managing your money with your partner is smoother than ever. You can track shared and personal accounts, set goals, and stay.
It's official as NBA veteran Norman Powell joins the Heat roster.
You are Locked On Heat, your daily Miami Heat podcast.
We're doing a deep dive into Norman Powell, what he can bring to the Heat, some lineup combinations, and what it means for the Heat's long-term planning. But let's start with the biggest concern over the fit, David. How will Miami balance offense and defense with this new backcourt, right? So let's start with the offense. And I want to start with a few stats I looked up since our last podcast, breaking down the trade minutes after it happened, right? So got a little bit more time throughout the day to dive into some of the numbers and really carve into what this means for Miami. So here's some stats that I dug up. Norm Powell, he averaged 22 points per game on 42% shooting from three. We all knew that already. He was one of 4 players to average at least 20 points and 7 3-point attempts on 40% from three last season, joining Kyrie Irving, Zach LaVine, and Darius Garland. All-star level offensive players. Darius Garland was nearly an all-star last year. He had that kind of season. That speaks a lot to the offensive ability that he's bringing to the table. Doing some of advanced stat stuff here. Box plus minus. It's sort of an aggregate grade from Basketball Reference. Norm Powell would have graded out as Miami's second best offensive player last season, according to Box Plus Minus. I thought that was interesting. And then B-Ball Index ranks him 11th in three-point shooting talent in the NBA. And that's a metric that takes into account a bunch of different three-point shooting metrics like pull-up threes and catch-and-shoot threes and corner threes and pull-up three-point shooting accuracy and consistency and all these other crazy, wild B-Ball Index type of stats. They put an aggregate three-point shooting one together. And he was essentially the 11th most talented three-point shooter in the league last year. Tyler Hero was 10th. Their numbers were nearly identical. So to me, there's no question that this is going to help the offense. Those are some of the good numbers that I found.
Yeah, I was surprised in looking into it as well, the sheer volume in terms of the majority of his field goal attempts are from three. Like, that is the bulk of his offensive game at this point. And it kind of figures that much considering Kawhi Leonard, Zubac, and even an older James Harden can get to the rim. And so that leaves the perimeter kind of his area of domain. And I just think when you look at Miami's offense, now all of a sudden you've got a much more reliable three-point threat to pair alongside Tyler Hero. At least that seems like what the likelihood of what's going to happen in Miami's future. And that being the case, that kind of lets Bam be more of the attacking center. Khalil Ware, I think, is certainly going to have an increased role, and you hope that he can live up to that. And I know we're going to talk about that balance a little bit more, but just being able to find that balance offensively as a unit because of Powell's three-point shooting and the amount of three-point shots that he's going to be taking certainly seems like it's going to be an advantage for Miami.
So you mentioned James Harden there. And if I have a concern, it's what does Norm Powell look like without James Harden setting him up? Say whatever you want about James Harden. He's still a genius level passer, playmaker, still one of the best guys at setting up teammates in the league.
Right.
James Harden had 115 assists to Norm Powell last season, 3 times as much as the next Clipper. And as we've talked about a lot, the Heat don't have a playmaker in the same universe as James Harden. Are you concerned about that? Without somebody setting up Norm Powell, like you said, this guy, overwhelming amount of shots from three-point range. He kind of is one of those players. He can create his own shot. He is a lot better when he has somebody like Harden setting him up.
I think those opportunities will come. I look, Harden certainly commands a lot defensively, but I think Miami can get those looks. They can find ways of generating the open looks or finding the open shooter on the perimeter, just because I think Hero is going to command some attention, Bam, Ware, etc. Even Wiggs is going to command some attention if he's still a part of this roster. So I think there's enough opportunity there. It's just a matter of whether or not he gets the kind of space that he's used to. And that might be a little different because I think you have to focus a little bit more on Leonard, Harden, etc. And that might be a little bit more challenging, but I think they'll find the balance. I really do. I think it's not as much of a concern as you might think. And I know a lot of his scoring is mostly assisted in terms of generating those wide open looks, but I think Tyler's continued evolution as a playmaker, and that's something that we kind of overlooked. He's not a natural point guard. We know this. We've gone over this a number of times, but he has evolved as a playmaker, and it's dismissive of his growth in that regard because I think he's done a lot. For a guy who was never asked to pass the ball, never expected to pass the ball, and never necessarily want the ball in his hands to be a playmaker, he's grown in that regard, and I think he's going to be able to make things a little bit easier for Powell to get those kind of looks that he needs.
Yeah, and you can argue maybe with Hero and Powell that might be a little bit better floor spacing than what the Clippers had, just because Kawhi was in and out, and when Kawhi wasn't in there, it was a lot of Chris Dunn, Derek Jones Jr.
They got Bogdanovich too, though, remember.
They got Bogdanovich after the trade deadline. That's true. So yeah, maybe it's a wash there. The other part I am a little concerned about what it looks like without the drive and kick nature of somebody like James Harden. Again, maybe Tyler Hero can do a little bit of that. Davion Mitchell can do a little bit of that too. Andrew Wiggins, if he's still on the roster, I mean, he's a guy who can run pick and roll. So maybe it'll be more of a committee approach than where the Clippers were very much, hey, James Harden, you're running the offense, and when you're not doing it, it's Kawhi facilitating out of the post. And that's essentially their entire offense. And it worked, right? I'm nothing against it, but that was their offense. Miami doesn't operate that way. They're more of a committee approach. The one thing I do like is Norm Powell is an ace off of dribble handoffs. He was averaging 1.1 points per possession off of dribble handoffs last year, which is just a hair less than what Tyler Hero was averaging at 1.12. So on almost the same amount of like frequency and attempts. So you're kind of just, look, the more and more I dive into the numbers, the more it feels like they just added another Tyler Hero to the offense in terms of the shooting part of it. He's not what Hero is with the float game, with some of the playmaking stuff that we've talked about. Like at that level, he's not like the 3-level scorer that Hero is in that regard. But in terms of the floor spacing, 3-point shooting part of it, you kind of just added another Tyler Hero to the lineup.
Yeah, I'd say he could finish at the rim a little bit better than Tyler. I think Tyler certainly takes the mid-range floater area. And in terms of 3-point shooting, I think Norm might actually be a little bit better of a 3-point shooter. I don't know.
High percentage he
was.
Tough.
Yeah,
but he was also being he was being set up a lot better than Hero was.
Yeah, and
he gets
in
the
terms
line.
of he does get to the line. That is another thing that I like about that. And look, Zubac had a fantastic year, an all-star level year himself. Your most improved candidate, if I'm not mistaken, and
behind
he's a
Hero,
great screen setter as well. Yeah, that is right. So I think the Clippers were a really good team, and there's no doubt that Powell benefited from that. But I think he was a reason why they were able to thrive, and I think a lot of people expected the Clippers not to necessarily be as good as they were last year, and Powell was a big part of that. He had, as you've said, an all-star level campaign. I remember a lot of people talking about, he was one of the guys that were snubbed because he put up great numbers. That if you're going to make a case for Tyler Hero, you could absolutely make a case for Powell playing in the Western Conference. So I think he comes to Miami, and almost the expectation, I would say, is that he emerges as their go-to lead scorer.
Ooh, over Hero?
Yes.
I don't know.
Yes.
It's still going to be Hero and maybe even Bam. Maybe not. I don't know. Maybe it's interesting. I hadn't even thought about that. It feels like with Hero being the incumbent, it'll still be. I would be a little surprised if Powell finished with more points per game than Hero did.
Well, we'll see, because I like his ability to get to the line a little bit better. But we know the ship has sailed on him and his possible growth in that regard. Now, he can get better, and I'm not even saying this. We don't expect. We're not going into camp with the expectation that Bam is going to evolve into a 25-point game scorer. Like he'll be closer to the 20-point averages that he has in the past. That's fine. But as such, I think he's still naturally their third best option. But I would love to see what camp looks like with Powell and Hero kind of trying to assert themselves as the top dog. And I think I kind of like Powell's chances, to be honest with you. It's not a knock. Hero, his playmaking, I think, might be a little bit better of an advantage in that regard. Yeah. But that doesn't mean that if he's looking to be the playmaker, and look at it from that perspective. If Powell emerges as a better scorer, just pure in terms of pure scoring ability, and that forces Tyler into more of a playmaking role, that's kind of a great playmaker / scorer to have on your roster in Hero. And I don't think you have to necessarily feel bad about that from either Tyler's perspective, and certainly not as a fans. Like, you all of a sudden have a high level scorer that can also play make and create opportunities for others. And if Hero embraces that challenge, and I expect that he would, unless Miami has another move up their sleeve, and that's certainly another possibility, then I would say Miami got a hell of a boost offensively on Monday morning.
Summer sports are in full swing, and whether you're all about baseball under the lights, golf on the green, or high-stakes soccer action, FanDuel is the best way to make every game even more exciting. You're already following the action. Why not make it a little more thrilling? With FanDuel, you can get in on the game while your friends are getting sunburned at the beach. I've been using FanDuel to track my favorite matchups all summer long, and the app keeps it fresh with new daily promotions, fun ways to bet. It's easy to use, fast to pay out. It makes even Regular season games feel like must-watch events. Whether I'm placing a same-game parlay or watching a bet ride into the ninth inning, FanDuel makes it feel like I am part of the action. New to FanDuel, new customers can bet just $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if your first bet wins. Open the FanDuel app today or visit FanDuel.com to get started.
You are Locked On Cavs, your daily Cleveland Cavaliers podcast.
The Cleveland Cavaliers held their first media availability of the offseason on Monday morning at Cleveland Clinic Courts. The Cavs had a summer league practice, and we will talk about that a little bit because Omar Cook talked, who is the head coach of the Cavs Summer League. Tyrese Proctor talked, of course, who was the Cavs' first draft selection, number 49 overall in last month's NBA draft. But the big story of the day was that Lonzo Ball met with the media for the very first time since the Cavs acquired him via trade with the Chicago Bulls before the start of free agency over 10 days ago at this point. Ball was in town. He was at the facility, and he said that he spent a lot of the day in doctor's office, I presume, for a physical just to get checked over, make sure everything is good. And all indications are that they are. And there are a few things that I really took away from this first meeting with Lonzo. And the thing that stood out to me the most is Lonzo Ball right now seems like somebody who is all about one thing. And that one thing is winning. That was the first thing that was brought up. That was something that he talked about the most. It wasn't the only thing he talked about. Of course, we asked him questions about other things. I think there are a lot of fair questions about his health, how he's feeling, considering all the injuries that he's gone through over the past several years. But he's about winning. That is the thing that I think is very clear and evident that came across from his media availability on Monday. He is somebody that has been on playoff teams, but because of injuries, he has never actually played in the playoffs. And I do think that he recognizes, and it was very clear to me coming through his answers, I do think that he recognizes that he is in a really, really good spot. He's in a very good situation. He's been put on a very, very good team, one that has championship aspirations, or I guess more accurately would be championship expectations, would probably be a better way to say that. But he talked a lot about winning, and that's the thing that matters to him. I do think it was also pretty clear and pretty easy to tell during this media availability that Lonzo Ball loves basketball. Like, that is, I don't know if that is like his first priority in life. I don't know him. I can't pretend to say that one way or the other, but basketball really seems like it is something that is very, very, very important to him, which is something I do think is call me crazy, a really good quality to have in an NBA player. Like, this is going to be something that I look at him as somebody who I expect to have a very strong work ethic, somebody that I expect to hear a lot of positive things about as a basketball player. And I really think coming out of this, and I think if you've been listening to the show over the last week and a half or so since the Cavs made the trade for Lonzo, I think you kind of know where I come out on this, that this is something that I do think will ultimately be a good move for the Cavs. But there's that gigantic caveat of if he's healthy, because that is ultimately the big if here. Like, when Lonzo Ball is healthy, he's a pretty good basketball player. It's just Lonzo Ball hasn't only played 70 games in the last 4 seasons combined, so he hasn't been healthy very frequently, mostly because of a knee issue, but also a wrist issue that cost him the back half of last season. So he did say that his body is right now where he wants it to be. That, of course, was what a lot of the questions that we had for him were, is that, where are you at physically right now? What has this journey been like? Because he played 35 games his first year with the Chicago Bulls, and the Bulls were a very good team for those 35 years. He had a knee injury, missed the rest of that season, and then missed the remaining 2 seasons. He played the front half of the season, and the Chicago Bulls were certainly, I think, cautious is a fair way to put it, with his minutes, with his workload, with easing him back into being an NBA player. But he did get to the point where he was maybe not an every night, 30-minute a night guy, but I do believe he did have some 30-minute games in there where it's not as if he was on a minutes restriction every single night. And I would expect the Cavs to be somewhat cautious with his minutes load, maybe not early in the season, because I do think it is fair to expect, considering the timeline, that we got for Darius Garland when he had his toe surgery, I do think it's fair to expect that maybe Darius Garland shouldn't be playing 35 minutes a night. Not that he'll play that much anyways, but I don't think a full minutes load for Darius Garland is necessarily going to be something that is in the cards at the start of the season, just considering the initial return to play timeline that we received from the Cavs when he did have surgery. So maybe he'll play a little bit more early, but I wouldn't anticipate him playing more than 25 minutes a night for the entire season. And I think that could be a good recipe for him. But he did say one of the things that he was very happy with last year, of course, the wrist injury is what kept him out from the end of February on. And I did hear that had Chicago made the playoffs, there was a good chance that Lonzo would have been able to play in that first round series that would have been against either I think only the Cavs, because I believe they were a 9-10 team. So had the Bulls faced off with the Cavs in the first round, Lonzo Ball could have played in that series theoretically. Now, of course, they lost in the play-in, so that didn't happen, and we will never know whether or not he would have been able to. But one of the things that Lonzo talked about is he was happy with the way his knee responded to everything last year. Once he started playing, he was, I think, a little nervous, a little cautious, it's fair to say, but he was happy with how his knee responded, and he really didn't have issues with it. Now, we'll see what that looks like having, a full season, where this past year it was October until the end of February, where the expectations for Lonzo Ball and the Cavs this year are going to be October until the end of June. That is going to be the expectation for him. So I do think that is something that maybe monitoring his minutes is a wise idea for the Cavs, a wise idea for Lonzo Ball personally. And I know it is. Listen, I thought Lonzo had a very good press conference on Monday. I did. And I know it's very easy to win these press conferences when you're a new person in a new place, where I think fans, for the most part, are pretty excited about the Lonzo Ball addition. And I do think the fact that he has a very interesting story, not just the injury stuff, but the fact that he's been in the spotlight for a very, very long time, being not only just a former number 2 overall pick, but I think that family, the Ball family, between Lonzo, LaMelo, even his brother, who is in the music industry now, his father, LeVar, all of those people have been in the spotlight for a very long time. So this is a very interesting story. And I do think that he knows how to do this stuff. This is not the first time he's at a press conference. It's not the first time he's been in that setting. So I don't think like him winning the press conference is a big deal, but you would much rather have him win it than lose it. And I do think that he won it. And just coming out of this, I think the Cavs are going to, if Lonzo Ball stays healthy, I think the Cavs are going to get a very, very, very good version of him. I think he's somebody that is very motivated. As I mentioned at the start, I think winning is the thing that is first and foremost on his mind. I think that is what is most important to him. Basketball is obviously a very, very high priority for him. And he is somebody that I think can help the Cavs. That's the other thing too, that, we can talk about the ifs of, if he stays healthy, what does he look like? But I ultimately think the thing that he brings is he allows the Cavs to morph into a better version of themselves. Because with Lonzo Ball on the floor, and one of the things he was asked about, I believe Chris Fedor of Cleveland.com was one who asked him about this. But Lonzo was asked about, the defensive end of the floor, because throughout his career, he has been somebody that has been graded out as a pretty good defender. And he is a bigger guard. He is not a defensive liability. He has never been a defensive liability. Even as he worked his way back from injury, he was not somebody that was a defensive target. He's able to get around on that end of the floor. He's able to do a lot of really good things on that end of the floor. He made a comment that, obviously when he was growing up at Chino Hills and playing alongside his brother LaMelo in high school, I believe he called it a reckless style of basketball. And if you remember some of those YouTube videos or videos on Instagram, or maybe even Vine at that time, oh my goodness, I can't believe how long ago that was. But like there would be videos of LaMelo pulling up from half court and whatnot. And Lonzo wanted to make the point that, maybe not everybody on the floor was playing defense at the time, but he certainly was. And I think that is obviously a good thing for the Cavs, that he is a good defender. I think the level of versatility that he provides to the Cavs is lineup flexibility first and foremost, where now
I know that playing Sam Merrill at the 3 didn't necessarily go all that well last year. Now it's a much easier thing to play him at the 3 in lineups that have Lonzo Ball.